This happened about 2 years ago, and I'm still not entirely sure I believe it myself. The only reason I'm sharing this now is because we finally moved out of that house last month, and I figure enough time has passed that I can talk about it without losing my mind all over again. So my girlfriend Sarah and I had just bought our first house together. We'd been saving up for years, living in this cramped studio apartment downtown, and we were beyond excited to finally have our own place. The house was perfect, or at least we thought it was. 3 bedrooms, decent-sized yard, quiet neighborhood. The kind of place where you could actually picture yourself settling down, you know? Everything was going great for the first couple weeks. We were unpacking boxes, painting rooms, doing all that new homeowner stuff. Sarah was especially excited about fixing up the guest bedroom. She had all these plans to make it super cozy for when her parents visited. That's when the dream started. I've always been a pretty heavy sleeper, but suddenly I was having these incredibly vivid dreams every single night. And they were all about the house. In the dreams, I'd be walking through the rooms, but everything would be slightly different. The walls would be a different color, or there'd be furniture we didn't own, or sometimes whole rooms that didn't exist in real life. The weird part was how real they felt. Like, I could smell the paint on the walls, feel the texture of carpets that weren't actually there. I'd wake up totally disoriented, expecting to see the dream version of our bedroom instead of the actual one. At first, I just figured it was stress from the move. Moving is supposed to be one of the most stressful life events, right? So I didn't think much of it. But then Sarah started mentioning her dreams too. She was having the same kind of things, super realistic dreams about the house, but with details that were totally different from reality. We'd compare notes over breakfast, and it was freaky how similar they were. Like we were both dreaming about the same alternate version of our home. The really disturbing part started about a month in. I had this dream where I was in the basement, and there was this old wooden chest sitting in the corner. In the dream, I opened it up and found all these old photographs of people I didn't recognize. They looked like they were from the 1980s or something, based on the hair and clothes. When I woke up, I laughed it off. We didn't even have a basement, our house was built on a slab foundation. But when I went to grab some coffee from the kitchen, I froze. There, sitting on our kitchen counter, was a single photograph. Black and white, definitely old, showing a family of 4 standing in front of what looked like our house. I called Sarah over, and she went totally pale. She recognized the photo from her dream the night before. But here's the thing, neither of us had ever seen this photo before in our lives. We bought the house from an elderly couple who'd lived there for decades, and they'd cleared out everything when they moved. Sarah suggested maybe they'd left it behind accidentally, and we just hadn't noticed it until now. That made sense, I guess, but it still felt really weird that we'd both dreamed about it. Things escalated from there. Every few days, something from our dreams would show up in the house. A coffee mug we'd never seen before sitting in the sink. A book on the nightstand that neither of us remembered buying. Small stuff, but it was adding up, and we were both getting seriously freaked out. The worst incident happened about 6 weeks after we moved in. Sarah had this nightmare where she was in our bedroom, but instead of our bed, there was this old hospital bed with restraints on it. She said in the dream, she could hear someone crying from inside the closet, but when she tried to open the door, it was locked. She woke up screaming, which scared the crap out of me. I calmed her down, told her it was just a bad dream, all that supportive boyfriend stuff. But when we got up the next morning, our bedroom closet door was locked. And we'd never had a key for it. I tried everything to credit cards, bobby pins, even called a locksmith. The guy came out, took one look at the door, and told us there was no locking mechanism. Just a regular closet door with a standard handle. But it wouldn't budge. That's when I started doing research on the house's history. I went to the county records office, talked to some of the longtime neighbors, even tracked down the previous owners. What I found out made my blood run cold. Back in 1987, a family of 4 had lived in our house. The father had some kind of mental breakdown and ended up killing his wife and 2 kids before taking his own life. The murders happened in our bedroom. The police reports mentioned that the wife had been found locked in the bedroom closet. I didn't tell Sarah about this right away. I was hoping the weird stuff would just stop on its own. But the dreams kept getting more intense, and more things kept appearing in the house. Things that seemed connected to that family from 1987. The breaking point came when Sarah found a child's drawing taped to the inside of our medicine cabinet. It was a crayon drawing of our house, but with 4 stick figures lying on the ground with red scribbles around them. At the bottom, in a kid's handwriting, it said, "Daddy was mad." That night, we both had the same dream. We were standing in our living room, but it was decorated like it was the 1980s. The family from the photograph was there, but they were all pale and their eyes were completely black. The father kept saying, "You're in our house now," over and over again. When we woke up, every single light in the house was on. Every faucet was running. And written on our bathroom mirror in what looked like condensation were the words, "Get out." We packed our stuff that morning and stayed at Sarah's parents' house for a week. When we came back to get more of our things, we found the house exactly as we'd left it, but with one addition. Sitting on our kitchen table was a lease agreement for the house, dated 1987, with the dead family's name on it. We put the house on the market the next day. I don't know if those dreams were somehow connecting us to what happened there, or if the house was trying to recreate that tragedy through us. All I know is that we got out before we found out what would happen next. The really messed up part? The realtor told us that every family who'd lived in that house since 1987 had moved out within 2 months. We lasted 6 weeks, which apparently was pretty good. We're renting now, and I've never been happier to not own property. Some dreams are meant to stay dreams, you know? And some houses are meant to stay empty. This whole thing started about 4 months ago when my girlfriend Emma and I bought our first house together in Oregon. We'd been living in a cramped apartment for 3 years and were beyond ready to have our own space. The house was a decent size, built in the 1970s, and came with a pretty big basement that I was planning to turn into a workshop since I work in construction and always have projects going on. Everything was normal for the first few weeks. We were unpacking, setting up rooms, doing all the usual new homeowner stuff. Emma was working from home at the time, so she was there most days while I was out on job sites. That's when the dreams started, though I didn't make the connection right away. I've always been a pretty vivid dreamer, but suddenly I was having these incredibly detailed dreams about construction projects. Not just any projects though, specific renovations and additions to our house. In the dreams, I'd be working on elaborate blueprints, measuring rooms, planning out electrical work, plumbing layouts, the whole 9 yards. The weird part was how technical and accurate everything felt. I'd wake up remembering exact measurements and specific building codes. At first, I figured it was just work stress bleeding into my sleep. When you're in construction, you think about building stuff all the time anyway. But these dreams were different. They felt more like memories than dreams, if that makes sense. Like I was remembering work I'd already done instead of imagining work I wanted to do. The really strange part was that Emma started having dreams too, but hers were about the house's history. She'd dream about previous owners, about rooms being used for different purposes, about structural changes that had been made over the years. She'd wake up knowing things about the house that we'd never been told, like that the kitchen had been remodeled in the 1980s or that there used to be a bedroom where the current living room was. We started comparing notes over breakfast, and it was honestly pretty fascinating. Her dreams about the house's past seemed to connect with my dreams about potential future renovations. Like we were getting some kind of complete picture of the house's timeline, what it had been, what it was, and what it could become. The first time something from the dreams showed up in real life, I almost missed it. I was down in the basement looking for the main water shutoff valve when I found a rolled up piece of paper wedged behind the water heater. When I unrolled it, my heart nearly stopped. It was a blueprint for a basement workshop layout, exactly the same design I'd been dreaming about for weeks. The drawing was detailed and professional, showing electrical outlets, workbench placement, tool storage, everything. But here's the thing, I'd never drawn these plans in real life. I'd only seen them in my dreams. Yet here they were, drawn on actual blueprint paper with technical specifications that matched my dreams perfectly. I called Emma down to look at it, and she went completely pale. She said she'd been dreaming about finding old documents in the house, and this was exactly what she'd seen. We both stood there staring at this blueprint, trying to make sense of how something from our dreams could be physically real. That's when we decided to do some research on the house's previous owners. Emma spent hours online looking up property records, and I talked to some of the neighbors who'd lived in the area for decades. What we found out was pretty interesting. The house had been owned by a contractor named Robert Chin from 1985 to 2003. According to the neighbors, he'd been obsessed with renovating the place, constantly working on new projects and additions. The weird part was that Robert Chin had died in the house. Heart attack, right there in the basement while he was working on some kind of project. The neighbors said he'd been working on basement renovations for months before he died, but they'd never been completed. His family had sold the house as is, and apparently none of the subsequent owners had ever finished whatever he'd started down there. Over the next few weeks, more things started appearing. I'd find sketches tucked into random places around the house, behind picture frames, inside old books, even taped to the underside of drawers. Every single one of them matched something I'd seen in my dreams. Emma was finding things too: old photographs, receipts for building supplies, even a journal with entries about renovation plans. The journal was the most disturbing part. Robert Chen had written about having incredibly vivid dreams about the house, about seeing its potential and feeling compelled to keep improving it. Some of the entries were pretty normal, just notes about projects he wanted to complete. But toward the end, the writing got more frantic. He wrote about feeling like the house was communicating with him through his dreams, showing him what it wanted to become. The last entry was dated just 2 days before he died. He wrote about having a dream where he was working in the basement, and in the dream, he could see the finished workshop so clearly that he felt like he was already there. He said he woke up with the overwhelming urge to start working immediately, even though it was 3 in the morning. That's when I realized what was happening. The same dreams that had driven Robert Chen to work obsessively on the house were now happening to me. And just like him, I was starting to feel this compulsive need to actually build the things I was seeing in my dreams. The problem was, I didn't want to end up like Robert Chen. But the dreams were getting more intense, and I was finding it harder and harder to resist the urge to start those basement renovations. Every night, I'd dream about the workshop in perfect detail, and every morning, I'd wake up with this burning need to make it real. Emma was having her own issues. Her dreams about the house's history were becoming more vivid and disturbing. She started dreaming about Robert Chen's final days, about him working frantically in the basement, about him clutching his chest and collapsing right where I now wanted to build my workshop. Things came to a head about 2 weeks ago. I'd been fighting the urge to start the basement project for days, but the dreams were becoming overwhelming. I'd wake up with my hands cramped like I'd been gripping tools all night, and I'd catch myself unconsciously sketching workshop layouts during the day. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up at around 2 in the morning and went down to the basement with a flashlight and a tape measure. I started measuring the space, planning out where everything would go, completely absorbed in the work. That's when Emma found me. She said I'd been down there for 3 hours, and I had no memory of most of it. I'd apparently been talking to myself the whole time, having conversations with someone who wasn't there. When she called my name, I looked up at her like I didn't recognize her for a second. That's when we both realized we were in serious trouble. The house wasn't just showing us dreams, it was trying to recreate Robert Chen's obsession through us. And if we weren't careful, we were going to end up just like him. We packed up and left the next morning. We're staying with Emma's parents now while we figure out what to do with the house. Part of me wants to go back and finish that workshop, which I know sounds insane. But the dreams haven't stopped, even though we're not living there anymore. I've been doing some research into the house's history before Robert Chen, and I'm starting to think he wasn't the first owner to become obsessed with renovating the place. Property records show that several previous owners had made extensive modifications to the house, often dying or moving away before completing their projects. I don't know if we're going to sell the house or just walk away from it entirely. All I know is that some dreams are too dangerous to make real, and some houses are meant to stay unfinished. I bought my first house when I was 25, and honestly, I was pretty excited about finally having my own space. I've been living with roommates since college, and the idea of not having to deal with anyone else's mess or noise was amazing. The house was small but perfect for me: 2 bedrooms, decent kitchen, and a nice front porch where I could sit and have my morning coffee. The first few weeks were great. I was getting used to living alone, decorating the place how I wanted, all that new homeowner stuff. But then the dreams started. At first, they were just weird, not scary. I'd dream about someone knocking on my front door in the middle of the night. Always the same pattern: 3 slow knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. In the dream, I'd get up to answer it, but when I opened the door, no one would be there. Just the empty street and that weird feeling like someone was watching me. The dreams felt incredibly real. I'd wake up thinking I'd actually gotten up and checked the door. Sometimes I'd even find myself standing in my living room, confused about whether I'd been sleepwalking or just dreaming. After about a week of these dreams, something strange happened. I was having my morning coffee on the porch when I noticed muddy footprints on my front steps. 3 sets of prints, like someone had walked up to my door, stood there for a while, then walked away. The weird part was, it hadn't rained in days, so I had no idea where the mud came from. I figured maybe it was just a mail carrier or someone delivering packages. But the footprints were too small to be from a man, and they didn't match any of the delivery people I'd seen before. That night, I had the dream again. But this time, when I opened the door, there was a woman standing there. She was probably in her 50s, with dark hair and this really intense stare. She didn't say anything, just looked at me like she was waiting for something. I tried to ask what she wanted, but I couldn't speak. Then I woke up. The next morning, there were more footprints on my steps. This time, they went all the way around to my backyard. I followed them and found that someone had been looking through my kitchen window. There were clear heel marks in the soil under the window, like someone had stood there for a long time. That's when I started getting really freaked out. I called the police, but they said without any actual evidence of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I install some security cameras, which I did the next day. The dreams continued every night. Always the same woman, always standing at my door. But they were getting more detailed. I started noticing things about her, the way she dressed, the fact that she always carried a small purse, how she'd tilt her head when she looked at me. It was like my brain was filling in more details each time. Then I started seeing her during the day. Not in person, but in reflections. I'd catch a glimpse of her in my bathroom mirror or see her face reflected in my car window. Always just for a split second, but it was definitely her. The security cameras didn't catch anything for the first few days, which almost made me feel worse. Like maybe I really was losing my mind. But then, on Thursday night, they caught something. At 2:47 a.m., a woman walked up to my front door and knocked 3 times. Then she waited, knocked 3 more times, and just stood there. For almost an hour. She never tried to open the door or look through the windows. She just stood there, perfectly still, staring at my door. The footage was grainy because of the low light, but I could tell it was the same woman from my dreams. Same height, same build, same way of standing. When I saw the video, I got this sick feeling in my stomach because I realized my dreams weren't just dreams anymore, they were somehow showing me what was actually happening. I called the police again, and this time they took it seriously. They came over, looked at the footage, and said they'd patrol the area more frequently. But they couldn't do much unless she actually tried to break in or threaten me directly. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. But I didn't have the usual dream, which was almost more unsettling than having it. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "I've been waiting for you to invite me in. We need to talk about David." I had no idea who David was. I'd never known anyone named David, and I'd only lived in the house for a month. But somehow, the name felt familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. That night, the dream changed. Instead of just standing at my door, the woman started talking. She told me that David used to live in my house, that he was her son, and that he died in the back bedroom, the room I was using as my office. She said David had been calling to her in her dreams, telling her that someone new was living in his house, that he was scared and confused and needed her help. She said she'd been coming to the house every night because David's spirit was trapped there, and she was the only one who could help him move on. In the dream, I found myself believing her. It all made perfect sense. I told her she could come in, that I'd help her however I could. I woke up in a cold sweat, realizing what I'd done. Even though it was just a dream, I'd invited her in. And somehow, I knew that meant something. The next night, she didn't knock. She just walked right through my front door like it wasn't even there. In the dream, she thanked me for inviting her in and said she needed to spend some time in David's room to help him find peace. When I woke up, I immediately went to check my office. Everything looked normal, but there was a smell I couldn't identify. Sweet and floral, like old perfume. And on my desk, there was a photograph I'd never seen before of a young man, maybe early 20s, standing in front of my house. I did some research and found out that a David Morrison had indeed lived in my house. He died of a heart attack in 2018 in what was now my office. His mother, Helen Morrison, had been his only surviving family. That's when I realized Helen Morrison was the woman in my dreams. And somehow, through my dreams, I'd given her permission to come into my house. The dreams continued, but now Helen was inside the house, not outside. She'd walk through the rooms, talking to David, telling him it was time to go. I could hear both sides of the conversation, even though I couldn't see David. During the day, I'd find evidence of her presence. A cup of tea on the kitchen counter that I hadn't made. The smell of her perfume in different rooms. Sometimes I'd hear her voice, very faintly, like she was in the next room. The worst part was that I was starting to see David too. Not clearly, but just glimpses. A shadow moving past the doorway. A figure sitting at my desk. The feeling of someone watching me when I was alone. I knew I had to do something before this got worse. I tried to research Helen Morrison, but I couldn't find any current information about her. No address, no phone number, nothing. It was like she didn't exist in the real world anymore. Last week, I had a dream that felt different from all the others. Helen was standing in my office, and she looked sad. She told me that David was finally ready to move on, but that she wasn't sure she could leave him. She said she'd been so lost without him that she'd forgotten how to exist without his presence. In the dream, I told her that she needed to let go, that staying in my house wasn't healthy for any of us. She nodded and said she understood, but that she needed one more night to say goodbye. That was 3 days ago. I haven't had any dreams since then, and I haven't found any evidence of Helen being in the house. But I also haven't felt alone. There's still this presence, like someone is always just out of sight, watching and waiting. I don't know if Helen and David moved on, or if they're still here, just being quieter about it. All I know is that my dreams somehow opened a door that I'm not sure I know how to close. I'm thinking about moving. Some houses have too much history, and some dreams are too real to ignore.